All right. Good morning to the writer space world out there. We're very excited to have a special conversation today. We are celebrating the 1 year anniversary of the release of Facing the Jaguar, written by Babs Walters, while also diving into the shared experience of writing deeply personal memoirs about trauma, survival, healing, and finding your voice. Joining Babs this morning is fellow memoir writer Heidi Yewman, author of Dumb Girl. Both women have courageously shared stories centered around incest, sexual child abuse, trauma recovery, and what happens when survivors decide to stop carrying the shame in silence. This conversation may touch on difficult subjects, but our hope this morning is that it offers connection, validation, hope, and community. So just be aware if you're watching that this live stream does include discussion of incest, child sexual abuse, trauma, and discovery. So take care of yourself if you need to. Babs Walters is a memoir writer and survivor advocate whose book Facing the Jaguar chronicles her journey through trauma, survival, healing, and reclaiming her voice. Over the past year, her story has resonated deeply with readers who saw pieces of themselves reflected in her honesty and vulnerability. Through her work and public conversations, Babs continues helping survivors feel less alone. Heidi Yewman is an author, speaker, survivor advocate, and longtime gun violence prevention activist whose memoir, Dumb Girl, explores the lasting impact of sibling sexual abuse, trauma, silence, and healing. Heidi is known for creating candid and compassionate conversations around subjects that many families and communities still struggle to discuss openly. In addition to her advocacy work surrounding survivor support and sibling sexual abuse awareness, she has spent years publicly speaking about gun violence prevention, trauma, and the power of storytelling to create change. So welcome, ladies. We're very excited to have you.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. Appreciate
Very happy.
Of course.
Wonderful. So Babs, let's start with you because this is your 1 year anniversary of releasing your book. How are you feeling and what emotions are coming up for you looking back over the course of this year?
Well, emotions is the right question, Elizabeth. But first, I'd like to thank you and Writer Space for allowing me to mark what you're calling the first anniversary. Heidi and I might call it a birthday because putting this personal story out into the world is very similar to giving birth. But I'm particularly grateful to have a conversation that includes Heidi. And because of Heidi, the two of us are working together really in the same area. Emotions, it's like a menu. I think my first emotion was excited. It's finally, the book is released, But then right after excited came anxiety. Wow, I wonder if it's good enough. Maybe I should have written some more or revised some more, After that, I thought about fear. Wow, I really exposed myself. I put a lot of me out there. What are people going to think of me? Then all of a sudden, the next emotion was gratitude. There were so many people that helped me get to this place. Brooke Warner and She Writes Press, all of the sisters in our cohort, our memoir cohort, the whole team, even the support that I got from friends and family, book launch that was huge. And lastly, after all of that, all of this mixture of stuff put together, there was an emotion of relief. Because whatever it was, it's out there, and I'm ready to face the consequences.
So that's very interesting because I think that the consequences imply fear, right? I mean, were you afraid of a negative reaction to this book? I mean, you've kept this private for a long time.
That's true. Well, I had an early inkling from my sister that she was not happy with me putting the book out there. And she had actually threatened to sue me. So I was anticipating that she and some other family members would be negative. But I have faith in humankind, and I didn't think that people will read it and be negative about it. They may not like hearing about it. So I wasn't overly worried about negative reaction. But I have to tell you, on Amazon, I got a 1 1-star review, and it's not there was no comment, just a one star review. So I was feeling really badly about it, figuring that maybe it was my sister, you know.
Mhm.
But people have told me in my cohort that having a 5 star review makes people suspicious because they think everybody who reviewed your book then was your friends.
Right.
So now I have a slightly imperfect review stars, and I'm realistic. So it was good news.
That's that's kind of funny. It's good not to be perfect. People will find you more believable. Perfection is not believable, right?
Exactly, exactly.
So Heidi, talk to us a little bit about this similar subject with you, because I know that you had some definite fears about putting this out into the world, and your abuser is still with us in the world, and so there's some fraught emotions about that. Talk to us a little bit about how you felt putting that out into the world.
Yeah, I was pretty nervous about it. I had a legal review, a lawyer review the whole entire book because I've done gun control over the last 27 years, and I've been very public and I've been a very national person in that movement. So there's stories about being grabbed by Senator Ted Kennedy, sort of sexually assaulted. And so I had to be very careful about how I wrote about that. He's died, and a person who's deceased can't sue you. But I was a little bit worried about the estate and then also my family members. I wasn't quite sure what to do because everybody was alive when I was writing the book, and I was concerned. At first, I thought about going under a pen name. I thought about um, not changing names, but I ultimately decided to change names because it doesn't really matter what names I use for people. But it took me a little bit while to get over that because it felt like dishonest. It felt like I was still keeping the secret of my family because I was not using real names. But the sort of my goal in this book was it's not a revenge memoir. It is not. I'm not trying to cause anybody pain, even my perpetrators. So it was really important that I be honest in the best way that I could, but also to protect myself from any fallout that might happen. But again, I don't I don't wish ill for any of the people who've hurt me. That's just not the kind of person I am. I'm not a revengeful person. I just wanted to get through it. I wanted to heal. I continue to work on healing, and I'm hoping for other people that they can be inspired by my story and my story of empathy for myself and empathy for other people around me.
Nice. So, Babs, give us a little bit of a background, just a quick summary of your story. What did happen to you, so that people have some context. They should absolutely read the books to really delve into the stories themselves. But tell us a little bit about that, and then tell us what drove you. What was your purpose in putting this book out there?
Thank you. Well, both of my parents were teenagers from broken homes who were sent to a reform school, and that's actually how they met each other. And while they were there and housed on separate campuses, they somehow managed to become pregnant. And I was there, but I can't tell you how they did it. But they had to run away from New York because they couldn't get married without parental permission. And my father was drafted almost immediately after that and trained to be a sniper and kill with one bullet. And my mother was left alone in a strange state where she knew no one as a teenager with a baby. And when my father comes home after the war, he finds another man in there. And this becomes their dance of their relationship. He's always angry, fighting, and hurting people. She's always running away with somebody else. So this wasn't a very healthy environment for children to grow up in. And at some point, my father decided that I was mature enough and replaced my mother and began to have sex with me under the threat that if I told anybody, that he would have to kill me. And to make his point, he would always have a gun available right on the night table by the bed. And I was 11 years old and I believed him. I later read in an encyclopedia the definition of the word incest because I didn't know what was happening to me. We didn't have body safety or body autonomy classes when I was a girl.
Hmm.
And when I read that incest was sexual relations between two people too closely related by blood to marry, I realized that these authorities or experts who wrote the encyclopedia had no idea what was going on with me, how afraid I was, or how much pain I had. And I made a decision that day that someday I would write a book and another little girl would not feel so all alone. So my whole mission was just to be a witness out there for other people. Of course, it took me a very long time because I didn't realize how much healing I had to do in order to write a book that people could actually read.
Yeah, I mean that you have to get to a point where you're ready to tell that story and face the fear and the shame and the consequences and all of that. So, when did you start writing the book, Babs?
Well, I wrote it. It's interesting that you said that. I wrote it in my 40s when I was took a class at NYU, and it was a novel writing class, so I was fictionalizing the whole thing. And one day the professor came up to me and said, "You're good enough to stay in the class, but you got to go home." He said, "Even war and peace has some peace in it.
Oh,
You've got a lot of work to do." So, 40 years of therapy, self help junkie, every seminar, webinar, a how to book. This has been my journey in life. And of course, in my career, I was doing a lot of women's empowerment. So, I've always been a stand up and deliver person. I just never really told my story.
mhm.
So, I decided that for my 80th birthday last year, I was going to keep my promise to myself. And facing the Jaguar is it.
I love that. I love that. Heidi, tell us a little bit about your story and the same thing. Tell us a little bit about why you felt compelled to share this with the world as well.
Yeah, so the book is called Dumb Girl, and the title came from I grew up in a very male toxic family where I was the only girl. I had three brothers, and there was a saying always to that was directed at me, Heidi, don't be a dumb girl. And it was shortened to DBADG, don't be a dumb girl. And it was said very quickly, like Heidi, DBADG. So if I saw a spider, if I screamed at something, if I cried, if I had emotions, if I had to pee, anything that was perceived as female, I was told DBADG. And so what happens to you mentally when that happens is you start really um, it embodies you. And so I tried not to be dumb and I tried not to be a girl. And there was a moment in fifth grade when I was 11 where my dad was very angry at me because I failed my social studies grade. And he had me take all of my F papers and tape them up onto my wall. And when I got done taping them, he said, now all your friends will see how stupid you are. So I went to sleep and I woke up to that wall every night and every morning for months. I was terrified to take it down because he was very physically and emotionally abusive man and very violent. And so when you wake up to the wall showing you that you are dumb, then you believe it. And so the title of the book is about me sort of overcoming um, this label that was put on me that I really bought into, and I struggled in school because of it. It was my whole self esteem. And so I had to overcome that. And so the book is about really about it's a braided memoir, which means half of it is about my gun control work and being harassed by gun guys and setting up vigils and protests and testifying in state houses about gun bills and writing books and films about people who've been victims of gun violence. And it's about how I had to face my fear. So my worst fear always was to be around angry men, and I would cower and I would avoid that. But when you're in the world of gun violence prevention and gun control, you're that's just part of the deal. You have to engage with angry men and angry men who carry guns. And so it's about me finding my voice, finding my power, finding my confidence that came from an abusive childhood, not just physical and emotional abuse, but also being sexually abused by my brother. So I'm a survivor of sibling sexual abuse. And so all those things combined, feeling dumb and then going into this field where I could sort of face my fears and then come out the other side. It's about that. So it's a really empowering book, where I kind of come out on top. And I've had the life that I never imagined I could have because I was just going to be a dumb girl my whole life.
Yeah, that's amazing. So when you write a memoir, that's hard enough for anybody, right? The best memoirs are the ones with the most honesty, right? And the most as much as you can have objectivity about your own self and your own life and sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly. But writing a memoir about incest and sexual abuse is a whole other level of story to tell and a whole nother level of vulnerability. So, Babs, why do you believe this story needed to be told, and what do you hope the impact of it will be going forward?
Well, I kept the promise to myself. I really needed to do that because all my life I interpreted what happened to me as there's a reason and I have to make a purpose and meaning out of it. Otherwise, I would just destroy myself with the shame and guilt. So my meaning and purpose has always been to create a space where people feel safe to use their own voices. When I was in charge of the sexual harassment committee in the companies I worked in, and women would come to me with their complaints, I trained them to speak up for themselves, always as a first choice. I could have gone in and straightened out any of those situations. I had the authority, but I thought it was important to use your own voice. And what surprised me about my ability to speak about a difficult subject is that not only have other people opened up in ways that have actually shocked me and sometimes triggered me because, I'm almost completely healed, right? Um, but I think that what was most important is that the story no longer became about me.
Hmm.
It was no longer my story. It was how I could create an environment where people would have a conversation about it. And that was the big learning. Um, it's one thing to read a book. It's another thing to take the information and go out and talk to other people about it. So when I found out that people who were reading the book were asking me questions about how do we protect our children? How do we see whether they're being groomed? What resources can I turn to? They weren't just reading a story. It wasn't just Oprah time. It was taking this topic and wanting to make change. And we know that the very first step in any change is awareness. So for me, the book allowed me to make other people more aware and for them to take the work and bring it into their lives.
Right. And your story is the catalyst for that, which is the gift of what you've done, right, by writing this book. So Heidi, talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, sibling incest is a highly, highly rare form of sexual abuse, isn't it? And I think that's something that people don't even really have awareness of. So in writing your story, what was your end goal, and what have you seen in terms of reaction that has moved you or been surprising to you?
Well, let me just say to start is that is the thing about it is their researchers are finding that there's not a lot of funding for it, so research is hard. But they're finding that sibling sexual abuse is much more prominent than father-daughter incest.
Uh,
It's not reported. It's sort of more complicated in that way. There's when they find that, like, so for instance, a brother molests a sister. There's the complication of what do you do with that family member, because oftentimes the boy is quite young. So anyway, they're still researching this, but it's a marginalized community within a marginalized community, and people don't think that it happens that often, or it's dismissed as, oh, boys will be boys, right? Or it's two kids playing doctor. But if there's an age discrepancy, so if there's an older boy and a younger girl, and there's a power dynamic, then it's incest. And so anyway, they're still researching that, but I just wanted to say that. So for me, the book came about. I was at a Vagina Monologues, which is a play that is put on all the time around the world, and it was playing in Santa Monica, and Jane Fonda was at this play, and it was in 2018, and she decided in this moment of Me Too had just sort of started, and we're in the middle of the Me Too movement, or the beginnings of it, and she asked the audience that I was attending to stand up and say Me Too. And there was this moment for me, and I start my book with this story where I just was consumed with shame. And I'd been this very public speaking person about gun control and standing up for gun victims. And I found myself just consumed with shame, and I couldn't stand up. And I eventually did stand up, but it wasn't in this moment of power and solidarity with all these other women in the audience. I was embarrassed, and I didn't want to be this person, and I didn't want to have this story. And I remember afterwards just really thinking, the way I get rid of this shame is I have to just be public about it. I have to stop pretending it didn't happen to me, and I have to stop doling out this part of me just singularly to friends when I feel like I'm in a deep enough friendship with them that now I can share this part of me. Like, this needs to be an outward part of me. And so writing my stories down, and then very publicly, and then talking about them with folks, it was a huge moment of healing for me, because I shed the shame and I stopped protecting the little girl who had been hurt so much. I stopped protecting her, and through silence. My family all knew about it. My birth family knew about what had happened, and there had been some therapy early on, but I didn't tell anybody else because I was protecting everyone else in my family, because we were this perfect family and everyone wanted to be like us, and we were really big in our church, and there was this reputation to protect, and I finally figured out this isn't worth protecting anymore, and it's not good for my mental health to protect this institution that I'm a part of.
I find that so interesting, because I think when people go through trauma, and these are extreme forms of trauma, but any trauma, for example, I remember when I got divorced, I really didn't want to be a statistic. I didn't want to be the statistic of women who ended up divorced, even though it was the best decision for my life. And I had a hang up about it, which is just stupid, because who cares? But I think we all go through those things. It's a stigma that you feel by being identified in whatever way your trauma has made you feel identified personally, right? So what does it take in terms of therapy and in terms of being just done with the shame of it? Babs, let's start with you. What does it take to get to that point? Because I know you said you still can get triggered. I mean, this is a lifelong process. You're never just perfectly over it, and there are things that still can come up for you. So as you're going through that, what does it take to get to that point, and how do you protect yourself in those moments where these things still do come up for you?
That's a really complicated question, because you asked about 3 questions there.
I know, I'm sorry.
I'll start with one of them. Last year, when I was talking to a women's club, and the talk was over, a woman walked up to me and hugged me and whispered in my ear, "Please keep laughing and smiling. I'm going to tell you something, but I don't want my friends in the room to know." And she told me that she had the same experience that I did, and that she's never told anybody. And I don't know if you could hear it even now, the fact that she wanted me to laugh and smile so her friends wouldn't know.
Yeah.
I thought I was like way beyond, I was expecting people to come up and tell me these things. But the fact that she was still hiding uh, really triggered me.
But she needed you to know. She needed someone to hear
Well,
her
I
say
gave
it.
her the opportunity to
Yeah.
speak,
Hmm.
but what's important in all of these conversations that we have is what we take away from them, you know. And for me, writing the book was not about revisiting the past. It was about changing the future. And that's what I have to keep reminding myself when I get triggered. That in my religion, we're taught that every human being has a responsibility to repair the world.
Mm.
I just consider this world too messed up for me to repair all of it. So I'm sticking to my little corner of the world, and I know that I'm making a difference. So that helped me get beyond that point. But people have also asked me, and I didn't know the answer originally, what does it take to be resilient? You're
Mm.
so resilient. Look at how you overcame all of this, all these years. And I did some research and I found that Viktor Frankl wrote the definitive definition about resilience. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he said that if you can hold on to one positive thought while you're going through the most horrendous of circumstances, and you can hold on to that and maintain that, you can survive. And I was always a happy little girl who loved her books. So a book has even more meaning for me because that was my escape.
Right. That's amazing. And that's what a great definition of resilience. I mean, that's what, coming from someone who's experienced that.
The worst.
Um, right? I mean, you can't imagine much worse than that. Heidi, talk to us a little bit about your experience with the same questions.
Yeah, so for me it's about the shame and it's about just talking about it. So this morning I was actually at a business breakfast and I was talking to this guy who was telling me about his sustainability project, and it was very like it was too boring to remember it, right? It was this like very right thinking thing that didn't have anything to do with feelings. And I'm like, uh-huh, uh-huh. But anyway, so then he was asking me about what I do. And so I told him about the book. And there's this moment, and I'm sure Babs has experienced this, where you have to decide whether you're with a hairdresser or in a meeting or whatever, like how much do you want to share? And
Hmm.
so I'm talking to this guy, and he was very male. He was very he had a very strong male energy about him. And I found myself saying, yeah, part of my story is that I'm a survivor of sibling sexual abuse. And it was very felt very risky to say that because
Hmm.
I he's not going to go, "Oh, me too," right? And so but you never know, right? And so um but he received it fine, and it put him a little bit on his heels where he wasn't quite sure how to respond, so I didn't leave the pause too long, and then but continued. But I think it's in these moments, and this goes along with Bab's story, right? It's like you put yourself out there, you show your vulnerability, and then that invites other people to then also be vulnerable or to care for you or to care for themselves. Because when we tell stories, then we automatically start thinking about how do I relate to this story. And so this guy, he stopped talking about sustainability in his workplace and the air conditioning that they use. That's right, he was talking about air conditioning. And he started talking about family issues that he's had. So he doesn't share the same story as me, but it made him like softer. And then we were talking about personal things that we relate to and about trauma, and I think that's a good thing. And it's about Babs saying, you got to make the world a better place. And if you can show your vulnerability and you can tell your truth and your true stories of things that have happened to you, I think everybody has trauma in their history. Everybody. And so inviting people to talk about those things, I think is a great thing. And that's how we connect with each other, especially now when things are so divisive.
Yeah, I do think that is the hope that we have for the future is when you can relate to someone on a human level. I have found that the most dramatic and impactful conversations I have had are when you get down to the basic levels of survival and emotions and hope. and what does that in trauma, and what do all those things mean? And these are the ways, like you said, he softened immediately in that moment, and the conversation became a little bit different. So I think those things, evoke a range of emotions in people that are connecting in the world when we are all so disconnected. Um, Babs, what did you find harder, writing the book or letting people read it?
Well, I would have to say writing the book.
Mm,
I'm not there when people read it, so I don't really know what their reactions are. I can tell when I'm speaking what people's reactions are.
mhm,
And to Heidi's point, I find that a lot of times when I describe my book and I'm not sure about who's listening, I will say it's a true story about family secrets and generational trauma, which is true, but it's a little whitewashed. It doesn't actually have the abuse or the incest word. And one of the things that I find when I speak is that you don't escape this life without some trauma. Somebody made, that's a quote, I don't know who said it, but everybody can relate to trauma at some level. And I've had people come up with remarkable stories, heartfelt stories, things that they may not have shared with others, or things that my sharing provoked them to remember. Recently, a man came up to me and told me about what it was like to be a soldier in Vietnam.
mm,
And he said, he's in a trench next to his buddy, and he said, did you ever notice that when a bullet goes into a body, that it's about this small when it goes in, but when you turn your friends over, there's a gigantic hole? It was like, okay, please, please. But I thanked him. I mean, wow, okay. The first talk I ever gave, a woman came up to me and said, she pulled me into the kitchen and she said, I had a baby when I wasn't married and I gave him up for adoption. And I recently found him in one of these sources where you can reconnect, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with me. And she
mm.
broke down and started crying. So I'm hearing all kinds of stories, not necessarily ones that match ours. And I had to learn how to provide resources for people because I am not their therapist.
Right.
And while I have a master's degree in counseling, I'm not taking on everybody's trauma. I have enough of my own that I'm still working on. But I think that people can relate to the jaguar. And it's really a metaphor, but when my father would come to me at night, I would escape by squeezing my eyes real tight and tightening my body. And all I would see was black. And in the black, I would be in a jungle, and this jaguar would be chasing me. And the big confrontation for me is not with these groups. The big confrontation for me is when I faced my father, when I had my conversation with him and I asked him why he did the things that he did. So writing the book, well, like I said, it's hard to do. It's not easy. I don't know. Heidi, maybe you find writing easy?
So it felt easy in like just telling the stories and getting it out of my body. But what became really challenging was when I was working with an editor. And she said, okay, awesome, Heidi. Like you told this story. It's terrible. Your dad is hitting you, he's punching you. But I need you to go deeper and I need you to show us. So bring the reader with you by showing. And so I want to know, what did he smell like? What did the room feel like? What did his face like? Were there lines on his forehead? Did you see sweat? And so I'm like,
Mhm.
oh my God. And so what was so hard is I had to really go back into the trauma and place myself back in those moments, or back when my brother was molesting me, right? Like, what did I feel like in my body? What was I seeing? What was I smelling? What was the energy? What was the posters on the wall? And so, like, reliving it was terrible, but it was also really healing and really freeing. And I found that the sting of the memory and the sharpness of the memory softened slightly. Not didn't go away, but the edges of it became dull, a little bit dull. And I really appreciated that. And then talking about the book was was very surprising to me as well, because part of the hang up I had, and the like hesitation that I had about writing this book and then publishing it, was that I didn't want people, um, we have our own viewpoint, and I think those of us who've survived sexual abuse by a family member, we one of the coping mechanisms is to blame ourselves, because why would an adult or a person who's in charge of me do this to me? So we come up with these stories about I deserve it, or I didn't, I should have said no, or I should have. And so part of it for me, in this story that I would tell myself about, why this happened to me, I would minimize my family's effect on me, and how I would minimize that they weren't that bad. Like, maybe I was not seeing this right, or maybe my dad wasn't that violent. Like, if he punched me in the nose when I was 5, like, well, maybe I was in his way, right? So I would tell myself these stories. And so what I found incredibly validating is people would read my story and they would say, "Holy shit, I can't believe how terrible your dad was. What the hell?" And then I'd go, oh yeah, yeah, I guess he was that bad. And so people look at me now and think, how could you dismiss that, or how could you soften that? How did you not see that this was terrible? But that's what happens to you when you're a little girl or a little boy or whoever you are and you're abused, is you minimize the things. And so I found it incredibly validating that people, because I didn't exaggerate one word, I didn't change what happened. And so for people to then say, like, yeah, this was really messed up, it was like, oh, so like I got the reflection of the truth from the outside instead of what was in my head. And that was incredibly validating and healing for me.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting thing to point out, because I always say perspective is everything. And when you're a child and you're living in this bubble of abuse and you don't know anything different than that, then your perspective becomes warped of what is normal, or what is real or not real, or what should be or shouldn't be about your life. So on the journey of that, Heidi, how have you discovered what normal, which is such a loaded word, but how have you discovered and embraced what normal is and should be? Because you've talked about the life that you've always wanted and the family that you've been able to grow and cultivate, a happy, healthy family. How do you navigate through this bubble of abuse to find what is normal for you and what is happy?
Well, what I figured out is one of the most healing things I've done in my life is had 2 children. And so they are the same age as my younger brother and I were, who I was very close with and continue to be very close. And we both survived a lot together. We're both 3 years apart. My children are both 3 years apart. And so I felt like I was doing a do-over as a parent. And so it was a little bit problematic because I was a little bit more protective of my son than I needed to be. So when he was supposed to take out the trash and he'd get in trouble because he didn't by my husband, I would protect him, and my husband would say, "What are you doing? Like, you don't, this isn't your little brother. You don't need to protect him. No one's hitting him. No one's yelling at him. No one's embarrassing him." And so, but I felt like I was doing a do-over, and I was raising myself through my daughter, and I was raising my son, um, re-raising my brother through my son. Now, a psychologist would probably say, yeah, that's not such a great thing, the transference, right? But for me, it was really helpful because I realized, like, oh, like, it's not that hard to be a good parent and not hit your kid, or drink because you don't want to deal with the emotions of your kids or whatever. Um, and but throughout their childhood, I was constantly in a state of mourning of, like, oh man, why didn't I get to have this? Like, why didn't I get to have parents like this? Or I was jealous of them. Like, how, man, they have it made and they don't even know. And I wish I would have had that. And that's so unfair. Or just like sad for myself, you know? So those are the emotions that I was having all the time as I was raising the kids. But that really was a big thing for me, and extremely healing. And that was um, and I think I was a great mom because of it, because I decided this is not going to happen to my kids. They are not going to. It's like breaking the cycle, which is a lot of what Babs has done as well. It's like breaking the intergenerational cycle of abuse is a really hard thing to do. Um, and we're doing it.
Yeah.
And our
And
books
it shouldn't.
will give people the guidance and the permission to do that as well.
Right. And it should not be your responsibility to do that, but here we are and look at what you're
Right.
doing. And so, at least you've taken that strength and resilience, as we talked about, and done something positive with it. So, Bab, what about you? How did you navigate through this, and how have you been able to find some normalcy and some happiness, and get sort of past some of these things? I know it's an ongoing struggle, but how did you identify what normal was in your new normal as you went through life?
Well, similarly to Heidi, creating a family of my own
Hmm.
and wanting it to be a very large family because I was hooked on those books for girls in the 50s and 60s where it was all Donna Reed or one of the Brady Bunch
Hmm.
families. So I think that I reparented myself while I was parenting my children.
Hmm.
My oldest son, I would spend hours on the floor with him, playing with him, teaching him. The house suffered, everything suffered. We were together. When my daughter came along, definitely overprotective. Um, it's been one of my regrets, but there's nothing I can do about it now. She's a strong woman, and I'm proud of her. She's proud of me too. She's been one of my biggest advocates. And then, of course, my younger son, he's the product of divorce, so he was very independent. I was working full time, going to school at night, and parenting him. I'm very proud of the three of them, and I know that they would not be the people that they are if they didn't have my love and attention, and they still do. So, um, but I think that there's a part of that hurt little girl, to your point, Heidi, that um, is still wounded. And like if I think a situation is unfair, I get very triggered by that. I like justice.
Hmm.
And it's over my head, but I think also the fact that I devoted one chapter to researching the information that my parents told me about their lives and validating where they came from and how they turned into a person who could build a bomb in high school and a person who was considered promiscuous in those days. Um, it hasn't given me the ability to completely forgive them, but it's giving me the ability to give them grace. Had they not been my parents and I had heard about their lives, I would feel very different than I do about them now. So I'm constantly healing. And I think that the work that I'm doing, because I'm coming from it from a more professional point of view now, providing resources and opening up these conversations. I don't know if you know that last year I was interviewed for Brave Voices for the Library of Congress to record my story. And now I'm interviewing my third person. We pass it forward, pay it forward. So I feel that by encouraging other people to speak up, whether it's the checklist that I have on my website, how to tell when you're ready to tell. It's in 3 stages. It's not for everybody. We don't owe anybody our stories. I think it's a privilege to hear our stories, Heidi. And through all of the work that we're doing, that's how we continue to heal.
Hmm. Yeah. And that is very powerful. And like you said, it's not for everybody, but for the people who are able to do that, I think it is by the reactions that you've both received from people telling you their stories and telling you things they've never told anybody, you can see the power of that. But how is it, because both of you have done a lot of public speaking on this issue and others, how has that changed your healing journeys? Like, Bab, I think you started to touch on that when you talked about becoming, it's more of a professional endeavor, and less about you and more about, providing resources and support to other people. But how has it changed your own individual healing journeys to be public about these kinds of things, and put yourself in a place where people are seeking you out?
Well, I think maturity has something to do with that
Mm.
because I've I'm now in a relationship that somehow I got it right. It only took me 3 tries, but he says he's not the third. He says he's the last. But having a support system is huge, and I think that's one of the blessings of She Writes Press. Also, we have a sisterhood. Whether we're the group that published the same season or any of the ones that were there before us and the ones that are coming after us, we're all mostly women. I think it's almost entirely, but mostly women who are finding their voices, who are speaking out. And I think when your children are young and you're raising your family or you're working full time and going to school at night, you don't really have the luxury to tell these stories, which we do now. But I made a decision that this book was for the public. This was not the book that I would write if I were leaving a book for my children.
Mm.
And I spoke to each of my children individually, and I told them that. I spoke to my daughter first. She said, my daughter is so supportive. She said to me, Mom, why do I have to wait for the book to come out? Can't you send me the chapters when you send them to your editor? And my younger son, who's an all heartfelt kid, he's a man. He said, oh, I don't think I can read anything that shows you being hurt, Mom. But he paused and he said, but I think I'm going to have to read it so that I can ask you questions while you're still here to answer them. And my older son said, what difference does it make? Grandpa's dead. So that shows you 3 different children through my healing journey. And I wrote this book knowing that I was going to be put upon, that I was going to have to grow, that I was not going to try and help and support people if I didn't have the muscle to do that. So I am still learning.
Amazing. That's great. What about you, Heidi? What's been your experience with the visibility and how it's changed your healing journey?
So it's interesting coming off of 25 years of doing gun violence prevention and specifically storytelling. So I wrote a book where I interviewed 19 people who lost loved ones to gun violence and told their story of how they dealt with the actual shooting and the death notification, to how they dealt with the first anniversary, the birthdays, the Christmases, the Hanukkahs, and then how they sort of lived life throughout and found meaning. And then I did a film that came out in 2019 that's on Amazon Prime about where I interviewed 4 people who they bought a gun for self-defense and then ended up using it. And so when I come from a place of storytelling and storytelling about people's trauma, including interviewing a woman whose 8-year-old son found her gun and then accidentally shot and killed his 5-year-old little brother. And so telling those kind of trauma stories, I was sort of in tuned with, and I understood how to tell the story and how to publicly talk about these things. But it's very different when you're doing it about your own trauma. And so that was part of it. And what I discovered is I had been sort of using other people's trauma stories to really explore trauma and to explore perpetrators. And then it became time where like, oh, I need to stop hiding behind all these other people and I need to deal with my own trauma and I need to tell my own story. And so, but what I have found is I have this friend of mine who survived the shooting at Virginia Tech where 32 people were killed. And he survived. He had been shot 4 times. And I've been with him several times where he has spoken about his experience of being shot and surviving. And I've seen audiences just really lean in, and they'll say, oh my gosh, like the shooter was above you and he shot you, like tell me more. And they just really lean into it. And then I'll go out to dinner with some friends who don't know about my book, and they will say, you know, what's your, I'll tell them about my book, and I'll use the word incest, and there is not a leaning in.
Mm.
There is a leaning out. They're not quite sure what to say. And I do think it comes from a good place. They just don't want to like ask too many questions or trigger. But I found it fascinating that my friend Colin, people would ask very specific questions about his shooting, but my trauma is very different and people don't want to talk about it. And so I think there's this opening where we can normalize it, and not normalize the activity, but normalize how we respond to things and let people know, like, yeah, this is happening. It happens to me, it happens to all kinds of people that you don't even know that it's happened to. And so I think there's an impetus of I've found it very powerful. Like, I've got to tell these stories. And I think about that guy I was telling you about that I had was at the breakfast meeting. I wonder, is he going to go home and then tell his, wife about the conversation we had? And then she says, oh yeah, my best friend that happened to, or, oh, that happened to me, or whatever. And you don't know the ripple effect. And I think that's the power of what we do. But I think that's hard for Babs and myself, is we do have the reaction of audience members, but then at the same time, we know in our head that there are tons of people that read our book, hear us on an interview like this, and will never know the impact that we've had on them. We just won't. And I know that we do, and I am so proud of us for getting past that reluctance and the shame of telling our stories, and that we are telling our stories and we're putting it out there so people can then, we can't solve this problem if no one talks about it.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, like you said, it's hard sometimes to be the person who is the catalyst for these conversations, because you have to bear a lot of weight of other people's pain and trauma and stories. And you've kind of invited that by writing these books. Um, but I do know in my experience that when I got divorced, I navigated it relatively well, and I became like the go-to divorce girl, and everybody sent their divorced people to me. And there was a point where I was like, I don't know if I want to be the go-to divorce girl anymore. I've moved past that. I'm remarried. I'm happy. I have all these other things, but it was still continuing. So how in those situations, because you have written these books and put them out into the world, and you do invite the opportunity to talk about these things with people, how do you take care of yourselves when you're feeling that way? Because sometimes you're going to be exhausted, or you're going to be triggered, or you're just going to be not in the mood. How do you care for yourself so that you can continue this work? Babs, let's start with you.
Well, I think it's important to turn to someone who inspires you. So, Heidi, you inspire me. Thank you. For me, I've always been a movement person.
Mm.
So, 9 years ago, I became a certified jazzercise instructor, and I have my guns. Those are the safe ones, the ones I like. I dance. I love music. I'm happy to just float around. That works for me. But there are also times when I have to separate from people, and that is not always easily understood, because people see me as a social, extroverted woman. There's a part of me that is such an introvert that you'd find it hard to believe, but I must be quiet. I must have no input from anything around me. And I just do something mindless to empty my brain.
Yeah. What about you, Heidi?
So for me, I learned through the storytelling that I did when I would interview people for my book and for my film, that I have to, like, this will happen today. I'll get off of this webinar, and I will go, I'm absorbing a lot of Bab's energy. I'm absorbing her story. There's some sadness in me. I'm also talking about my own trauma, and I will go and find a place and cry. And what I've learned is I'm happy to absorb this energy, and I'm happy that my cells now include Bab's story more than I already knew. But I have to release some of it. And when you're working with trauma, people who've experienced great trauma, and you're hearing their stories, I found that if I cry, it doesn't have to be for a long time, but just to get that emotion out, then that helps me a lot. I'm like Babs. I love to move. I was a jock all through high school. I played volleyball in college. I love sports. And I play tennis a lot now. And I love just like hitting the crap out of a ball. And that feels so good. And so that's also a thing, but I'm not going to be able to do that until Saturday when I go and play. But yeah, like after I have a really intense conversation with somebody, I like, it's not always convenient, but it's like I need to go and cry and just like physically let this energy out. And so, a funny story though, when I was doing my film, when we were interviewing these guys or these people for my film, I was working with two men that were my camera operators, and I found this like I needed to do this, and so I said to them, I said, "Hey, do you guys want to pull over at the next street and we can cry?" They looked at me like, "What? No, no." I'm like, no, it's like really good for us. It'd be good for us because we've just absorbed all this energy from these people. Just this woman who just, like, we just interviewed, and she was so sad, and they were like, "No, we're good, Heidi." So I found like, oh, okay, maybe that's not for everybody, but that's what I do, and that's helpful. So I had to wait till we got back to the hotel, and then I did a moment by myself. But yeah, they didn't want to be a part of that, apparently.
That's so funny. That's why women need women, because we can all relate to that need to go off in a room and have a good cry. Maybe if men did it more, they would
Yeah, right.
have more access to their own emotional situations. So I just want to say, both of you inspire me. I love storytelling as well. I think that's how we do heal the world. The fact that Babs, you got certified to teach jazzercise, you must have been about 71 and you're still teaching 72. I mean, that's an amazing thing. And I do think movement is therapeutic. That's what works for me as well. And finding whatever it is that works for you, whatever trauma that you're going through, and being able to take that time to heal. And it appears to me that that's one of the things that you both have learned. You allow yourselves the time and the space to do what you need to do to continue your healing journeys so that you can then continue to be there for other people. So I find that to be very inspiring, and I think it's a gift that both of you are willing to share with the rest of us. Before we wrap up, Heidi, I know you are working on this 5 Waves conference in June. You want to give us a little bit of information about that? It's for sibling sexual abuse. It's the first conference of its kind.
Yeah, it's the first conference in the U.S. Specifically about sibling sexual abuse, and it's the focus is on lived experience from people who've experienced sibling sexual abuse. It's on the 23rd in Long Island. It's 23rd of June, and so I'm really excited to have been a part of these women who are organizing it, and then I'll be speaking alongside my husband. We're going to be telling the story of how sibling sexual abuse impacts a marriage, and the sort of nitty gritty and intimacy, and how it affects intimacy. That's, I think, one of the things that's not in a lot of the conversations still is obviously when you're being forced to have sex way before you should ever have sex, it's going to affect your sexual life in adult life, and it's really hard to heal from. And so I felt like it was an important part of the discussion that needed to be had. And it's very vulnerable feeling, and it's been hard to prepare for it with my husband. It's because we really struggle in this part of the healing process, and it's not just about me; it's about him as well.
Yeah, it's an important conversation, and I'm sure it's an important conversation for those who help support survivors to have a better understanding of that as well. So both of you are doing different speaking engagements, being invited on different podcasts. Babs, why don't you tell us what your website is so that people want more information, they're able to reach you? Where can they find you?
It's very simple, babswalters.com.
Perfect. And you can find her social media handles there as well. And Heidi, where do people find you?
Simple as well, HeidiYewman.com.
Perfect. And so both of them I know have resources on their websites. If you're experiencing anything like the things they've talked about today, they have some resources that can help direct you to some things that can be helpful. So please be sure to take a look at those if you need them. Also be sure to take a look at both of their books on their websites. You can also find them on writerspace.com. So thank you, ladies, both so much. I think this has been a great conversation. I think people have had to have learned a lot. I know I did.
Can we do a little wrap up?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think I've said it before, but for me, healing is a journey, not a destination. I expect that I'm going to be on this journey for a while. And maybe because of my age, I'm a role model in the fact that it's never too late to take a step in that journey. But there's nothing we can do about the past. We can't rewrite what has already happened. We know that the first step in any change is awareness. So together, we can keep this conversation going, and we can make a difference for children in the future. And ultimately, we know that the numbers of child sexual abuse, whether sibling or parent-child, are grossly underreported. Just because you're not hearing about it doesn't mean that it's still not happening in very large numbers. Any number that hurts children is too large as far as I'm concerned. So I thank you, Elizabeth and Writer's Space, and Heidi for being my sister on this journey. Sometimes we get a sister of choice, not a sister of birth. So thank you for that. And please find our books. Any place you buy books or any place you borrow books. But that helps support us keeping the work up.
Absolutely. Any final words, Heidi?
No, I think Babs encapsulated it perfectly. So thank you.
Perfect. All right. Be sure to find their books, support our authors, and tune in next time for another author chat. We will be doing, I think, another one this evening. So we will see you back again on Writer Space Live.